The morning sun blazed mercilessly over Windsor Castle as Sergeant James Mitchell adjusted his red tunic for the 100th time. Sweat beaded on his forehead beneath his bearskin hat, but he remained perfectly still. The temperature had already climbed to 32 degrees Celsius, and it was barely 10 o'clock in the morning. Weather forecasters had warned it would be one of the hottest days of the year, but royal duties never stopped for weather. James had been serving in the Queen's Guard for 8 years. He had stood through rain, snow, and wind, but this heat was something different. His heavy wool uniform, designed for London's typically mild climate, felt like a furnace. The thick red fabric trapped every ray of sunshine, and his tall black hat seemed to absorb heat like a magnet. Still, he kept his eyes fixed straight ahead, his rifle held at the precise angle, his face showing no emotion. Around him, tourists gathered with their cameras and phones. They wore light summer clothes, carried water bottles, and sought shade under trees. Some pointed at the guards and whispered about how hot they must be feeling. Children pressed ice creams to their faces to cool down, while parents fanned themselves with brochures. Yet the guards remained motionless, like statues carved from stone. The royal family was hosting an important garden party that afternoon. Foreign dignitaries, politicians, and charity leaders would attend. Security was heightened, and every guard knew their role was crucial. James and his fellow guardsmen had been positioned at key points around the castle grounds since dawn. They would remain there until the event concluded, regardless of the weather. As the sun climbed higher, James felt his vision blur slightly. The heat was becoming unbearable, but his training kicked in. He had been taught to endure any condition while on duty. The honor of protecting the royal family came before personal comfort. He thought about his grandfather, who had served in the same regiment during World War II. His grandfather had once told him that being a royal guard meant becoming invisible while being completely present. The castle grounds buzzed with activity as staff prepared for the afternoon's festivities. Caterers wheeled trolleys of food across the courtyard. Florists arranged elaborate displays of summer flowers. Security personnel conducted final checks of the perimeter. Through it all, the guards remained in position, silent witnesses to the organized chaos around them. James noticed other guards beginning to show signs of heat exhaustion. One young recruit's face had turned pale despite the blazing sun. Another guard swayed slightly, almost imperceptibly, but James caught the movement. They were all struggling, but none would break protocol. Their training and pride wouldn't allow it. The morning dragged on endlessly. Each minute felt like an hour under the relentless sun. James's mouth became dry, and his head began to pound. His heavy boots felt like they were filled with lead. The starched collar of his tunic chafed against his neck, made worse by the constant perspiration. Yet he maintained his position, knowing that thousands of people depended on the royal family's security. Tourists continued to flow past, some stopping to take selfies with the guards in the background. A few visitors showed concern, commenting loudly about how awful it must be to stand in such heat. Some even approached the guards to offer water, not understanding that accepting anything from the public would break strict protocol. The guards couldn't acknowledge these kind gestures, though James appreciated the thought behind them. By 11:30, the heat had become almost unbearable. James could feel sweat running down his back and legs. His vision began to tunnel slightly, a warning sign he recognized from his training. He knew he was approaching his physical limits, but the thought of abandoning his post never crossed his mind. The royal family's safety was paramount, and he had sworn an oath to protect them regardless of personal cost. The castle's ancient stones reflected the heat, creating shimmering mirages in the courtyard. Even the pigeons that usually strutted boldly across the grounds had found shaded corners to hide in. The only sounds were the distant hum of air conditioning units and the constant chatter of tourists. James focused on these sounds, using them as anchors to maintain his concentration as the heat continued its relentless assault on his body and mind. As the clock struck noon, the situation became critical. James felt his knees beginning to buckle, though he fought against every instinct to move or seek relief. His breathing had become shallow, and dark spots danced at the edges of his vision. The weight of his rifle seemed to triple, and maintaining his rigid posture required every ounce of willpower he possessed. To his left, he noticed Guardsman Peters beginning to sway more noticeably. The young man had only been with the regiment for 6 months, and this was his first summer assignment at Windsor. Peters' face had turned an alarming shade of red, and perspiration poured from beneath his bearskin hat. James wanted to help, but protocol demanded he remain motionless. Any movement could be seen as abandoning his post. The tourists seemed oblivious to the guard's distress. Families continued to pose for photographs. Children ran around playing games, and couples strolled hand in hand through the castle grounds. Some visitors did notice the guard's obvious discomfort and began speaking in hushed, concerned tones. A few approached the guards offering water bottles or suggesting they sit down, not understanding that such actions would result in immediate disciplinary action. Inside the castle, preparations for the garden party continued at full speed. The royal family was expected to make their appearance at 2 o'clock sharp. Marquees had been erected on the lawn, providing blessed shade for the hundreds of expected guests. Tables groaned under the weight of elaborate refreshments, and servers in crisp uniforms made final preparations. The contrast between the cool, shaded party area and the sun-baked positions of the guards couldn't have been starker. James tried to focus on anything other than the heat. He thought about his wife Sarah and their 2 young children waiting for him at home. He had promised to take them to the seaside the following weekend, assuming he recovered from today's ordeal. He thought about the pride his father had shown when James first donned the ceremonial uniform. He reminded himself that he was part of a tradition stretching back centuries, that countless men before him had endured similar hardships in service to the crown. The heat continued to intensify as the sun reached its peak. Meteorologists would later confirm that temperatures had soared to 35 degrees Celsius, making it one of the hottest days recorded in London that decade. The combination of direct sunlight, reflected heat from the stone courtyard, and the guards' heavy woolen uniforms created a perfect storm of heat exhaustion conditions. Other guards around the castle grounds were showing similar signs of distress. Reports would later emerge of several guards requiring medical attention throughout the morning. Some had been quietly replaced when they could no longer maintain their positions safely. The commanding officers monitored the situation carefully, balancing the need for security with concern for their men's welfare. At 12:30, disaster nearly struck. Guardsman Peters suddenly lurched forward, his rifle clattering against the stone wall as he struggled to maintain consciousness. For a terrifying moment, it appeared he might collapse entirely. The nearby tourists gasped and stepped back, unsure whether this was part of some ceremonial routine or a genuine emergency. Peters somehow managed to straighten himself and resume his position, but his condition was clearly deteriorating rapidly. James watched the incident from the corner of his eye, his own situation becoming equally desperate. His heart pounded not just from heat exhaustion but from concern for his fellow guardsmen. They had trained together, served together, and looked out for each other through countless ceremonies and duties. Seeing Peters struggle while being unable to help created an additional layer of stress beyond the physical torment of the heat. The castle's staff began to take notice of the guard's condition. Several maintenance workers paused in their duties, looking concerned at the obvious distress of the ceremonial guards. A few senior staff members were seen speaking in hushed conversations, glancing frequently at the guards' positions. However, protocol demanded that any changes to guard positions be authorized by the highest levels of command, a process that could take precious time. By 1 o'clock, James realized he was fighting a losing battle against the heat. His uniform was completely soaked with perspiration, and he could feel himself becoming increasingly lightheaded. His vision blurred intermittently, and maintaining his precise military bearing required superhuman effort. Yet still he stood, driven by duty, pride, and the knowledge that his position was crucial to the afternoon's security arrangements. The irony wasn't lost on him that while hundreds of guests would soon arrive to enjoy a pleasant garden party, in comfortable conditions he and his fellow guards were enduring what felt like torture to ensure their safety and comfort. This was the reality of service, the hidden sacrifice that made possible the pomp and ceremony that the public saw and admired. At 1:15 in the afternoon, just as James felt he might finally succumb to the heat, something unexpected happened. A small commotion near the castle's main entrance caught his attention. Through his increasingly blurred vision, he saw a familiar figure emerging from the cool interior of the building. It was Princess Charlotte, dressed in a light blue summer dress and carrying what appeared to be a small cooler bag. The 8-year-old princess had been watching the preparations for the garden party from her bedroom window. Unlike the adults around her who seemed focused on protocol and arrangements, Charlotte had noticed something troubling. She had observed the guards standing motionless in the blazing sun for hours, and her young mind couldn't understand why no one was helping them. She had asked her nanny why the guards looked so uncomfortable, and when told they had to stay at their posts regardless of weather, Charlotte decided to take action. Princess Charlotte approached her mother, Catherine, who was reviewing final details for the afternoon's event. In her direct, childlike manner, Charlotte expressed her concern for the guards. She pointed out the castle window at the red-coated figures standing rigid in the scorching heat. Catherine initially tried to explain that this was simply part of the guard's duty, but Charlotte persisted with the innocent determination that only children possess. The young princess had recently been learning about kindness and helping others in her private lessons. Her tutors had emphasized the importance of noticing when people needed help and finding ways to assist them. To Charlotte's 8-year-old mind, the situation was perfectly clear. The guards were suffering in the heat, and it was wrong to ignore their discomfort simply because of rules and traditions. After much discussion and negotiation with palace staff, an unprecedented decision was made. Princess Charlotte would be allowed to offer refreshments to the guards, but it would be done in a way that maintained protocol and security. The palace's head of security worked quickly with Charlotte's protection officers to devise a plan that would allow the princess to help while ensuring everyone's safety. Word spread quickly through the castle's staff that something unusual was about to happen. Servants paused in their duties to whisper about the young princess's initiative. Even the most senior palace officials who had seen decades of royal protocols admitted they had never witnessed anything quite like this. The idea of a member of the royal family personally attending to the guards' needs during a formal event was entirely unprecedented. Charlotte insisted on helping prepare the refreshments herself. She worked with the castle's kitchen staff to fill insulated bottles with cool water and prepare small cooling towels. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and soon several staff members were helping with the preparations. The princess carefully selected items she thought would help the guards most: electrolyte drinks, cooling wipes, and small portable fans that could provide momentary relief. As Charlotte made her way toward the courtyard, news of her mission reached the guards through their communication network. James felt a surge of emotion that had nothing to do with heat exhaustion. The thought that the young princess had noticed their suffering and chosen to help filled him with a profound sense of gratitude and renewed determination. This was why they served, why they endured hardships, to protect a family that genuinely cared about their well-being. The princess's approach created a ripple effect throughout the castle grounds. Tourists began to take notice, sensing that something significant was happening. Staff members emerged from various buildings to witness the unprecedented scene. Even the most jaded palace officials found themselves moved by the sight of the young royal family member taking such initiative to help those who served her family. Charlotte had been briefed on the proper way to approach the guards without compromising security or protocol. She understood that they couldn't break their positions or speak to her directly, but she had been assured that they would appreciate her gesture nonetheless. Her protection officers flanked her at a discreet distance, ensuring her safety while allowing her to carry out her compassionate mission. As she walked across the sun-baked courtyard, Charlotte herself felt the intensity of the heat that the guards had been enduring for hours. The stone pavement radiated warmth through her light shoes, and the sun beat down on her exposed arms. This first-hand experience only reinforced her determination to help the suffering guardsmen who had been standing in these conditions since dawn. The young princess reached the first guard position where Guardsman Peters stood swaying slightly. She had been instructed to place the refreshments nearby rather than handing them directly to the guards, allowing them to access help while maintaining their ceremonial duties. Charlotte carefully arranged a small cooling station beside Peter's position, including water, electrolyte drinks, and cooling towels. James watched from his position as Princess Charlotte methodically visited each guard post. Her genuine concern was evident in every gesture, and her determination to help despite the heat showed a maturity beyond her 8 years. This wasn't a publicity stunt or a coached royal appearance. It was a child's pure response to seeing people in need and wanting to help them. When Princess Charlotte reached James's position, she worked quietly and efficiently to arrange the refreshments within his reach. She placed a bottle of ice-cold water just beside his left foot, along with cooling towels and an electrolyte drink. But what happened next surprised everyone, including Charlotte herself. As she stood up after arranging the items, she looked directly at James's face and saw the obvious signs of heat exhaustion and distress. Without hesitation, Princess Charlotte did something that went beyond her original plan. She picked up one of the cooling towels and, standing on her tiptoes, gently dabbed at the perspiration on James's forehead. The gesture was so natural and caring that it took everyone by surprise. Palace protocol had never covered such a scenario, and for a moment time seemed to stand still in the castle courtyard. James felt the cool, damp cloth against his burning skin and experienced a wave of relief so intense it nearly brought tears to his eyes. But more than the physical comfort was the emotional impact of the princess's kindness. This young child, who could have been playing in air-conditioned comfort, had chosen to personally care for him and his fellow guards. It was a moment that would be etched in his memory forever. The tourists who had been watching the scene unfold began to understand they were witnessing something extraordinary. Cameras and phones came out as people realized this wasn't part of any planned ceremony. This was genuine compassion in action. Social media posts began appearing within minutes, with hashtags like Princess Charlotte Kindness and Royal Compassion trending almost immediately. Charlotte continued her rounds, visiting every guard position around the castle grounds. At each stop, she not only provided refreshments but also offered personal gestures of comfort. She adjusted cooling towels, made sure water bottles were within easy reach, and even used a small handheld fan to provide momentary relief to the most distressed guards. Her natural empathy guided her actions, making each guard feel seen and cared for as an individual. The 8-year-old princess had no idea that her actions were being recorded and broadcast around the world. News outlets quickly picked up the story, with headlines praising the young royal's compassion and initiative. Television crews that had been stationed at the castle to cover the garden party found themselves with a much more compelling human interest story than they had expected. Palace officials watched in amazement as Charlotte's simple act of kindness transformed what could have been a potential crisis. The guards, who had been reaching their breaking point, found renewed strength and determination. The cooling refreshments provided immediate physical relief, but the psychological boost of knowing they were valued and cared for was even more significant. As Charlotte worked her way around the grounds, she encountered Guardsman Peters again. His condition had deteriorated further since her first visit, and she could see he was in serious distress. Without being asked, she remained by his position longer, using multiple cooling towels and ensuring he had easy access to electrolyte drinks. Her presence seemed to give Peters the strength to continue standing. The princess's actions also had an unexpected effect on the castle staff and tourists. Inspired by her example, several staff members began organizing additional relief efforts for the guards. Kitchen staff prepared more cooling supplies, and maintenance workers set up small portable shade structures where possible. The tourists, too, began showing greater respect and understanding for the guards' difficult conditions. Catherine, Princess Charlotte's mother, watched from a castle window with a mixture of pride and concern. She had initially worried about Charlotte's safety in the heat, but seeing her daughter's determination to help others filled her with immense pride. This was exactly the kind of compassion and leadership they hoped to instill in their children, and Charlotte was demonstrating these values naturally and spontaneously. The garden party guests, who had begun arriving early, found themselves witnesses to an unprecedented display of royal humanity. Instead of the formal, distant ceremony they had expected, they were seeing the royal family's genuine care for those who served them. Many guests later commented that this simple act of kindness had given them more respect for the monarchy than any formal ceremony could have achieved. By the time Charlotte had visited all the guard positions, word of her actions had spread throughout the castle and beyond. Staff members who hadn't witnessed the events firsthand came outside to see the results of the princess's mission. The sight of cooling stations set up beside each guard position, and the visible relief on the guards' faces, told the story of a young girl who had seen a problem and acted to solve it. James felt the cooling towel that Princess Charlotte had placed on his forehead beginning to warm in the intense heat, but the memory of her gentle gesture continued to provide strength. He had served the royal family for 8 years, but never had he felt such a personal connection to his duty. This wasn't just about protecting an institution anymore. It was about serving people who genuinely cared about his well-being. The princess's actions had created a ripple effect that extended far beyond the immediate relief she had provided. Her example had reminded everyone present of the importance of noticing when others need help and taking action to provide it, regardless of protocol or convention. The garden party proceeded as scheduled at 2 o'clock, but the atmosphere had been completely transformed by Princess Charlotte's earlier actions. The hundreds of distinguished guests who had come to enjoy an afternoon with the royal family found themselves talking not about politics or business, but about the remarkable display of compassion they had witnessed from the 8-year-old princess. James and his fellow guards maintained their positions throughout the afternoon, but their situation had improved dramatically. The refreshments Princess Charlotte had provided gave them the strength to continue their duties, and the knowledge that they were valued and cared for boosted their morale immeasurably. The cooling stations remained in place, allowing the guards to access relief when needed while maintaining their ceremonial responsibilities. The international media response was immediate and overwhelming. News outlets from around the world picked up the story, with headlines praising Princess Charlotte's kindness and maturity. The images of the young princess personally caring for the guards resonated with people across different cultures and backgrounds. Social media exploded with positive comments, with many people sharing their own stories of small acts of kindness that had made big differences. What made the story particularly compelling was its authenticity. This wasn't a planned photo opportunity or a carefully orchestrated public relations event. Security cameras and eyewitness accounts confirmed that Charlotte's actions were entirely spontaneous, driven by her genuine concern for the guards' well-being. In an age of cynicism about public figures, this simple act of childhood compassion cut through the noise and touched hearts worldwide. The palace's communication team found themselves in the unusual position of managing a positive news story that they hadn't planned or orchestrated. Initial concerns about protocol breaches quickly gave way to recognition that Princess Charlotte's actions had actually enhanced the royal family's reputation in ways that no amount of traditional public relations could have achieved. Back at Untold, the guard positions the afternoon brought its own challenges as the heat continued to intensify. However, the guards found they could cope much better with the cooling supplies Charlotte had provided. More importantly, the psychological boost from her gesture had given them renewed determination. James later described feeling like he could have stood for hours longer, not because the heat was any less intense, but because he knew his service was genuinely appreciated. The garden party guests made a point of acknowledging the guards as they moved around the castle grounds. Many stopped to nod respectfully or offer words of appreciation, inspired by Princess Charlotte's example. Some guests, particularly those from other countries, commented that they had never seen such a personal connection between royalty and those who served them. Princess Charlotte herself seemed unaware of the global attention her actions had generated. She spent the rest of the afternoon enjoying the garden party like any other 8-year-old would, playing games and chatting with guests' children. When asked by reporters later about her decision to help the guards, she gave a simple response that demonstrated her pure motivation. They looked hot and tired, and nobody else was helping them. The story continued to gain momentum throughout the week, with major newspapers and television programs featuring extended coverage. Child psychologists praised Charlotte's actions as demonstrating excellent emotional intelligence and empathy, Royal historians noted that while members of the royal family had always been expected to show concern for others, such direct, personal intervention was unprecedented in modern times. Letters and emails poured into Buckingham Palace from around the world, praising Princess Charlotte and sharing how her story had inspired others to perform their own acts of kindness. Parents wrote about how they had used the story to teach their children about helping others, while veterans and service members expressed particular appreciation for the respect she had shown to those in uniform. The guards themselves became temporary celebrities, with media outlets seeking interviews about their experience. James spoke for many of his colleagues when he described feeling overwhelmed by the princess's kindness, and noted how her actions had reminded him why he was proud to serve the royal family. The story provided a rare glimpse behind the ceremonial facade to show the human cost of royal duty and the genuine relationships between the family and those who protect them. Educational institutions began incorporating the story into lessons about kindness, leadership, and civic responsibility. The image of the young princess personally caring for the guards became iconic, representing the best aspects of service, compassion, and leadership by example. Teachers noted that the story resonated particularly well with young students who could relate to Princess Charlotte's age and direct approach to solving problems. The heat wave that had created the dangerous conditions for the guards eventually broke, but the impact of Princess Charlotte's actions continued to resonate. Palace officials reported receiving numerous requests from charitable organizations asking Princess Charlotte to become involved with their causes, recognizing that her genuine compassion could bring attention to important issues affecting vulnerable populations. For James and his fellow guards, the experience had created a bond with Princess Charlotte that went beyond their traditional role as protectors. They had seen firsthand her character and values, and this knowledge deepened their commitment to their service. The young princess had shown them that their sacrifice was noticed and valued, transforming their understanding of what it meant to serve the royal family. In the weeks following the incident, the impact of Princess Charlotte's actions continued to ripple outward in ways no one could have predicted. The story had transcended its origins as a simple news item and become a symbol of genuine leadership and compassion. James found himself reflecting on how a single moment of kindness from an 8-year-old had changed not just his perspective on his service, but his understanding of what true leadership looked like. The palace received thousands of letters from children around the world who had been inspired by Princess Charlotte's example. Schools organized Charlotte Days, where students were encouraged to perform acts of kindness for others in their community. Parents shared stories of how their children had begun noticing when others needed help and taking action, whether it was offering water to postal workers on hot days or helping elderly neighbors with heavy shopping bags. James returned to his regular duties with a renewed sense of purpose. The memory of Princess Charlotte's cool towel on his burning forehead had become more than just a pleasant recollection. It served as a daily reminder of why his service mattered. His fellow guards reported similar experiences, describing how the incident had deepened their commitment to their roles and their respect for the royal family they protected. The long-term changes extended beyond individual attitudes. Palace officials quietly began reviewing protocols for extreme weather conditions, recognizing that Princess Charlotte's intervention had highlighted genuine safety concerns. New procedures were implemented to ensure better care for guards during heat waves, including regular hydration checks, rotation schedules, and emergency cooling equipment. Charlotte's compassion had not only provided immediate relief, but had prompted systemic improvements in working conditions. International diplomatic circles took notice of the incident as well. Foreign dignitaries and officials began commenting on how Princess Charlotte's actions reflected the values and character of the British royal family. Several ambassadors noted that the story had enhanced Britain's soft power and international reputation in ways that traditional diplomacy couldn't achieve. The image of a young royal personally caring for those who served her family resonated particularly strongly in cultures that valued respect for service members and elders. Media analysts later identified the incident as a turning point in public perception of the monarchy. Polling data showed significant increases in approval ratings for the royal family following Charlotte's actions, particularly among younger demographics who had previously shown less interest in royal affairs. The authentic nature of her gesture had broken through traditional barriers of formality and protocol to create genuine emotional connections with the public. For Charlotte herself, the global response to her simple act of kindness became an early lesson in the power and responsibility that comes with her position. Palace tutors incorporated discussions about the incident into her education, helping her understand how her actions could influence others while ensuring she remained grounded and focused on the intrinsic value of helping people rather than seeking attention or praise. The story continued to be referenced in leadership courses and character development programs across various institutions. Military academies used it as an example of leadership by example and caring for those under one's command. Business schools incorporated it into discussions about authentic leadership and the importance of recognizing the human cost of organizational success. The simple image of Princess Charlotte dabbing a guard's forehead had become a powerful metaphor for compassionate leadership. Years later, James would often be asked about that scorching afternoon at Windsor Castle. He invariably described it as a defining moment not just in his career, but in his understanding of service and sacrifice. The physical relief that Princess Charlotte had provided was temporary, but the emotional impact of her gesture had proven lasting. It had shown him that his duty was valued not just as an institutional necessity, but as a human contribution that mattered to real people. The guards who served that day formed an informal brotherhood, bonded by their shared experience of Princess Charlotte's kindness. They would meet annually on the anniversary of the heat wave, sharing stories and reflecting on how that day had changed their perspectives on their service. New guards joining the regiment were told the story as part of their informal initiation, ensuring that the memory of the princess's compassion became part of the unit's culture and traditions. The incident also sparked broader discussions about the nature of service and sacrifice in modern society. Commentators noted how Princess Charlotte's actions had highlighted the often invisible contributions of service members, security personnel, and others who work in challenging conditions to ensure public safety and comfort. Her simple gesture had made visible the human cost of the ceremonies and events that the public enjoyed. As Princess Charlotte grew older, the memory of that hot afternoon remained a touchstone for her understanding of her role and responsibilities. Palace insiders reported that she frequently referenced the incident when discussing her future duties, viewing it as evidence that even small gestures could have profound impacts. The 8-year-old who had simply wanted to help some hot, tired guards had unknowingly demonstrated the kind of authentic, compassionate leadership that would define her approach to royal service. The story of Princess Charlotte and the royal guards became more than just a heartwarming news item. It evolved into a lasting reminder that genuine care for others, expressed through simple actions, has the power to inspire, transform, and create lasting positive change in ways that transcend position, protocol, and convention.